Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. And today we're going to be exploring The Wizard of Oz. I know what you might be thinking.
Right.
Another deep dive on a movie that everyone's already seen
Right.
a million times. But here's the twist.
Okay.
We're going to be using Roger Ebert's 1996 review as our guide.
Oh, wow.
He was arguably the most influential film critic of his time, and he had a knack for uncovering hidden depths in even the most familiar films.
That's interesting because I think what makes Ebert's perspective so interesting is that he doesn't just tell you what he thinks about a film. He invites you to think along with him.
Right.
He connects the dots between the film's themes, the filmmaking techniques, and even the cultural context in which it was made.
So it's like watching the movie with a friend who has X-ray vision, right?
Exactly.
Seeing things you might never have noticed on your own.
Yeah, and one of the first things Ebert draws our attention to is that iconic transition from black and white Kansas to the vibrant, colorful land of Oz. Imagine being in the audience in 1939, when color in film was still a novelty.
Yeah.
And suddenly you're transported to this dazzling Technicolor world.
It must have been mind-blowing. Even today, that transition still has a magical quality.
Absolutely.
When you say...
It's a testament to the film's enduring legacy and the power of that visual storytelling. But it's also fascinating to think about how those technical limitations, the fact that color was so expensive and difficult to use back then, actually contributed to the film's magic.
You mean because they had to use color so sparingly, they made those moments where it did appear even more impactful?
Think about it. If the entire film had been in color, that transition wouldn't have been nearly as striking. The filmmakers were forced to be creative, to make those splashes of color really count. And that's part of what gives The Wizard of Oz its unique visual style.
That's such a good point. It reminds me of how sometimes limitations can actually breed creativity.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And speaking of limitations, Ebert also dives into the surprisingly tumultuous production history of The Wizard of Oz. There was a fired director, multiple actors who played the Tin Man.
Oh, wow.
Margaret Hamilton's on-set injury. From the Wicked Witch's pyrotechnics, even Toto the dog got hurt.
Wow, it's amazing the film even got made with all that drama going on behind the scenes. I guess you could say that's also a testament
It certainly is.
to its enduring power.
And despite all those challenges, what ultimately shines through are those universal themes that Ebert highlights: home, leaving home, and facing the unknown. He talks about how those anxieties tap into a deep fundamental fear of being stranded in a strange land, something that resonates with both children and adults.
It's true, those fears don't just disappear when we grow up, do they? We might not worry about being lost in a magical land,
Right.
but we still face those feelings of vulnerability and uncertainty in different ways.
Exactly. And The Wizard of Oz offers us a way to process those fears, to explore them in a safe, fantastical setting. And what's interesting is that Ebert highlights how the film's impact goes far beyond just providing entertainment. He shares how The Wizard of Oz personally resonated with people from vastly different backgrounds, like author Salman Rushdie and novelist Terry McMillan.
I remember reading those parts in his review. Rushdie, who saw the film as a child in India, said that it made a writer of him, and Macmillan, growing up African-American in Michigan, said she completely identified with Dorothy when no one had time to listen to her.
What's striking is that despite their vastly different upbringings, both Rushdie and Macmillan connected with the film's themes of childhood, courage, and the challenges of finding your voice in a world that doesn't always listen.
It really speaks to the film's universality, doesn't it? It's not just a story for kids. It's a story about the human experience, about finding your place in the world. And speaking of finding your place, Ebert argues that Judy Garland's performance as Dorothy is absolutely crucial to the film's success, but he makes an interesting point. It's not just about her talent.
Right.
It's about her vulnerability.
He specifically says that a more confident, brassy child star wouldn't have worked as Dorothy. It was Garland's ability to project that tremulous uncertainty, a wistfulness, as Ebert describes it, that made her so relatable and endearing.
You know, when you put it that way, it's true. We believe her when she sings Over the Rainbow, because she genuinely seems burdened by those troubles. She wants to melt like lemon drops. A more self-assured child actor might not have conveyed that same depth of feeling.
Precisely, and that vulnerability extends to her interactions with her companions on the Yellow Brick Road. The Tin Man, the Scarecrow, and the Cowardly Lion aren't just random characters. They're projections of very common childhood fears.
That's a great point. The Tin Man longs for a heart, fearing he's not real or capable of love. The Scarecrow wants a brain, terrified of being seen as inadequate or foolish. And the Cowardly Lion, well, he embodies that universal fear of the unknown, of not being brave enough to face whatever life throws at you.
And Dorothy, in helping them overcome their fears, is actually confronting those same
Yeah.
anxieties within herself. It's a beautiful metaphor for how we all grapple with our insecurities
Yeah.
and how facing those fears head on can lead to growth and self-discovery.
It's like she's realizing that she has the power within herself to overcome these challenges, even if she doesn't always feel confident
Yeah,
or certain. And that journey of self-discovery is something that resonates with everyone, regardless of age.
exactly. And it's something that Ebert highlights so beautifully in his review. He helps us see these deeper layers in the film, layers that we might have missed on our own.
And speaking of layers, let's talk about the special effects. Ebert makes this fascinating observation about how the old Hollywood style, with its imperfections, actually enhances the film's dreamlike quality.
He contrasts it with modern CGI, which often strives for photorealism. But in The Wizard of Oz, those slightly obvious backdrops and painted sets create a sense of otherworldliness, as if we're truly stepping into a child's imagination.
It's like those imperfections make it more believable as a dream, more authentic to how dreams actually feel. You can tell it's a soundstage, you can see the painted backdrops, but that somehow makes it more magical, more evocative.
It speaks to that idea that sometimes limitations can be a source of creativity. The filmmakers had to rely on their ingenuity and artistry to create these fantastical worlds, and that resulted in a unique aesthetic that still captivates us today.
And then there's that brilliant use of the dream framework for the story. It works on so many levels, doesn't it? For kids, it's a literal dream. For adults, it becomes a metaphor for life's journey, full of challenges and unexpected turns.
Ebert even shares his own personal experience with that incredible tornado scene, how it vividly resonated with his childhood fears. He talks about being a child during the Depression, hiding in the basement during storms, and how those feelings of vulnerability and awe stayed with him.
So even for someone like Ebert, who had seen countless films and analyzed them with a critical eye, The Wizard of Oz still had this power to tap into those primal emotions, those childhood experiences that shape who we become. It makes you wonder, what is it about this film that continues to resonate so deeply, even across generations?
That's a question worth exploring further. What personal meaning do you find in The Wizard of Oz? What resonates with your own experiences and memories? We'll delve into some of those individual interpretations as we continue our deep dive.
You know, when we think about The Wizard of Oz, those ruby slippers instantly come to mind. They're not just sparkly footwear,
Right.
are they? Ebert points out how they represent grown-up shoes, symbolizing Dorothy's transition to maturity and her yearning for home, which has taken on a whole new meaning after her experiences in Oz.
It's fascinating how those slippers become this tangible symbol of Dorothy's journey, her literal and metaphorical steps towards growing up, and the fact that she's wearing them throughout her adventures. Facing all those challenges in those grown-up shoes adds another layer to the symbolism.
It's like she's being forced to confront those challenges head on, whether she feels ready or not.
And speaking of confronting challenges, you mentioned that those fears Dorothy encounters, feeling inadequate, lacking courage, questioning your place in the world, don't really disappear as we get older. We just learn to navigate them differently. What do you think The Wizard of Oz suggests about how we can do that?
That's a great question. I think one of the key takeaways is this: importance of friendship and support. Dorothy doesn't face those challenges alone.
Right.
She has her companions, each representing different aspects of her own personality and her fears.
That's a really interesting point. And it connects back to what we were discussing earlier about the Tin Man, Scarecrow, and Cowardly Lion being projections of those common childhood anxieties. In a way, Dorothy is helping them overcome those fears, but she's also learning from them, realizing that she's not alone in her struggles.
It's like by helping them, she's also helping herself.
Yeah.
And that sense of camaraderie, of having people you can rely on, makes those challenges feel less daunting. It reminds me of that quote from Ebert, where he says, "The Wizard of Oz is about the friends we need to find along the way."
He also points out that The Wizard of Oz was somewhat overshadowed at the time by Gone with the Wind, which was being produced at the same studio.
Wow. Can you imagine that? A film as iconic as The Wizard of Oz being seen as secondary to another movie?
It's hard to believe now, considering its enduring legacy. I guess that speaks to how perceptions of art can change over time. How a film that might not have been initially recognized as a masterpiece can later become a cultural touchstone. And it reminds us that sometimes those sleeper hits, the films that might not have all the hype or accolades at first, are the ones that end up having the most lasting impact.
And speaking of lasting impact, Ebert also talks about the cultural significance of The Wizard of Oz, how it's become embedded in our collective consciousness. Think about all those catchphrases. There's no place like home, lions and tigers and bears, oh my. And those iconic images, like the Wicked Witch of the West and those ruby slippers.
Those elements have transcended the film itself and become part of our cultural lexicon. We use them in everyday conversations, in advertising and music, even in political discourse.
It's like the film has entered our collective imagination, our shared language,
Oh,
almost
yeah.
like a modern-day fairy tale.
And that's a testament to the film's enduring power, to its ability to connect with audiences on such a deep level that it becomes woven into the fabric of our culture.
But beyond those cultural touchstones, I think what really makes The Wizard of Oz so enduring are those universal themes that we keep coming back to. Courage, friendship, self-discovery. Those are themes that resonate across generations, regardless of your background or personal experiences.
Exactly. And it's not just that the film presents those themes. It does so in a way that's both entertaining and thought-provoking. It gives us something to think about, something to connect with on a personal level.
And that's what makes this deep dive with Ebert's review as our guide so fascinating. It's not just about summarizing the plot or analyzing the characters. It's about uncovering those layers of meaning, those insights that we might have missed on our own.
It's about seeing the film with fresh eyes, appreciating its artistry and craftsmanship, and recognizing its enduring power to move and inspire us.
And speaking of seeing with fresh eyes, let's talk about that poignant transition back to black and white Kansas at the end of the film. What do you think Ebert is getting at when he highlights that shift?
It's a brilliant way to bring us back to reality, to remind us that the magic of Oz, that sense of wonder and possibility, eventually fades as we grow up.
But he also points out that even though the color is gone, the lessons Dorothy learned in Oz stay with her. She's not the same girl who left Kansas. She's faced her fears, discovered her inner strength, and learned the importance of friendship.
Exactly. And I think that's a crucial point that Ebert is making. Even though we can't stay in that magical world forever, the experiences we have there shape who we become. And maybe that's why The Wizard of Oz continues to resonate with us. It reminds us of that time in our lives when everything felt possible, when we believed in magic and it didn't let fear hold us back.
It's like a reminder to hold on to that sense of
Yeah.
wonder, that childlike curiosity, even
Yeah.
as we navigate the complexities of adulthood.
It's a reminder that there's still magic to be found in the everyday, in the connections we make, the challenges we overcome, and the lessons we learn along the way. And maybe that's the most enduring legacy of The Wizard of Oz. It teaches us that we all have the power within ourselves to find our own yellow brick road, to face our fears, and to create our own adventures.
And sometimes it's about realizing that there's no place like home, even if home has taken on a new meaning after our journeys.
Absolutely. And that leads us to a final thought-provoking question that Ebert poses. If you had to choose between living in Kansas or Oz, which would you choose and why? It's a question that invites us to reflect on our own values, our desires, and what truly matters to us in life.
Yeah, that's a really intriguing question to think about. Kansas or Oz, it really makes you think about what each world represents, doesn't it?
Right.
Kansas with its familiarity and routine versus Oz with its endless possibilities and challenges.
It's almost like a metaphor for the choices we face in life. The comfort of the known versus the excitement and sometimes the uncertainty of the unknown. And it's fascinating how Ebert connects that choice back to the political climate of the time. He mentions that The Wizard of Oz was released during the Great Depression, a period of immense hardship and disillusionment for many Americans.
So during a time when people were struggling to make ends meet, yearning for a better life, that idea of a magical land over the rainbow
Absolutely.
must have held a particular resonance, right?
It offered a sense of hope and escapism, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, there's still beauty and wonder to be found. But it wasn't just about escaping reality. It was also about finding the strength within yourself to face those challenges head on, just like Dorothy does.
That's a really powerful message, especially considering the historical context. It's like the film was saying, yes, things are tough right now, but you have the power within yourself to overcome these obstacles, to find your own way back home, even if it's not the home you originally imagined.
And that message of resilience and self-reliance continues to resonate with audiences today. even though we might be facing different challenges. It reminds us that no matter what life throws our way, we have the potential to find our own ruby slippers, our own sources of strength and courage to help us navigate those difficult paths.
It's like that journey to Oz with all its twists and turns becomes a metaphor for our own personal journeys, full of unexpected challenges and opportunities for growth.
And it's those individual journeys, those personal connections that people make with the film that contribute to its enduring legacy. As we've discussed, The Wizard of Oz has become more than just a film. It's a cultural phenomenon woven into our collective consciousness.
It's those catchphrases, the imagery, the characters. They've all become part of our shared language, our way of understanding the world and expressing ourselves. And I think that's a testament to the film's ability to tap into something universal, something that transcends time and cultural boundaries.
It speaks to the power of storytelling, of creating characters and situations that resonate with audiences on a deeply personal level. And it's that emotional connection that keeps us coming back to The Wizard of Oz, generation after generation, always finding new layers of meaning and personal significance.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into The Wizard of Oz, guided by Roger Ebert's insightful observations, what are some of the key takeaways you'd like listeners to remember?
Well, I think the most important takeaway is to remember that even seemingly simple stories can have profound depths. The Wizard of Oz, on the surface, might seem like a lighthearted children's film, but as Ebert demonstrates, it's so much more than that. It's a story about facing our fears, embracing our vulnerabilities, and finding the courage to create our own path.
And it's a reminder that those anxieties and uncertainties we experience as children, they don't just vanish when we become adults. They morph and evolve, but they're still there. And The Wizard of Oz offers us a framework for navigating those challenges, for finding strength in ourselves and in the connections we make. Along the way,
it also encourages us to look for the magic in the park. Every day, to hold on to that childlike sense of wonder and possibility, even as we face the realities of adulthood. And perhaps most importantly, it reminds us that there's no place like home, wherever that home may be for each of us.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into The Wizard of Oz. Through the lens of Roger Ebert's insightful review, we hope you've gained new perspectives on this timeless classic and that it sparked some personal reflections on your own journey. Remember, like Dorothy, you have the power within yourself to face your fears, find your own. Own Yellow Brick Road and create your own unique adventure. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.